All right, 𝗠𝘁𝘁𝗲𝗏, thank you for joining me in this conversation. Today we're going to be talking about the people don't matter, or do they? There's been a lot of disruption in the markets these days. We see a lot of stuff about AI all over the shop. AI seems to be taking over everything. There's a lot of political uncertainty at the moment that's causing a lot of redundancies and a lot of restructuring and a lot of uncertainty out there. And there's a lot of technological change. So I guess, do the people matter? Or don't they? Why are we talking about this? What do you think? Like, where are we actually? Why is this topical at the moment?
I think because of the focus on the new technology landscape, it tends to shift the focus on that technology and the capabilities it potentially offers. And I think inherently that shifts the focus away from the people elements. And I think it's certainly my experience would be that while there's that focus on some new piece of shiny technology, whether it's AI or something else, a new platform, a new ERP from an organizational perspective, when you're looking to upgrade your ERP systems, that absorbs the bulk of the focus. And that could be for reasons of that's where the biggest investment's coming. If you're looking for a significant global ERP implementation, that's big bucks, right? It's not a cursory investment. So there's inevitably attraction of attention to that, and that shifts the focus away onto all of the cost elements associated with that. And I don't think that's not entirely unexpected. I think the scrutiny that comes with that scale of investment you would expect for, particularly just taking that example, it's going to attract a lot of attention. There's going to be a lot of governance and scrutiny around that, which is fine. However, when we then shift to the delivery mechanisms, like a traditional program construct, the focus then continues to be focused on that implementation of that particular technology or whatever it is, and forgetting the end-to-end delivery of the outcomes. So a common question would be, so what causes these big programs to fail? And in my view, I think that you can probably boil it down into three key areas. We were unable to build something, just create something, whether that's building a new platform or a new system, or a new capability. We weren't able to deliver it, implement it, or we weren't able to realize the outcomes from it. So in different organizations, there's different primacies of those causes of failure. If we look at we couldn't build something, it's because we maybe didn't have the right skills in place, or we didn't have enough of the right skills in place, or we didn't understand our requirement, what our needs were. So therefore we were possibly building the wrong thing, or we're building something that we didn't fully understand, and actually we get into the implementation and it becomes very, very prolonged and protracted without any certainty around delivery.
And I think that's really interesting, right? Because I think there, exactly what you talk about is the focus is on the governance. It's on the what are we doing? How is it going to make our lives better? So even if you do have the outcome in mind, more often than not, it's about the physical building blocks of making these things happen. And it's about saying, hey, System X, this ERP is going to change the world. It's going to change your warehousing. It's going to change your logistic. It's going to change everything. And you're going to get these magical benefits at the other end of it, which absolutely should be the focus when you're trying to deliver the hard components of whatever it is that you're building.
What will generally tend to get missed is with that emphasis is, have we identified the need in a granular level, and in terms of actually understanding, well, this is how we do business today. This is how we operate today. Do we fully understand what that means with the prospect of a new bit of tooling that's coming in around that? And then finally, I think when we're considering the longer life cycle, as it were, post deployment, post implementation. So you've had all of the challenges around are we on track? Are we on focus? Assuming you've got to that point, quite often you'll find that the adoption hasn't been anything like as deep or as inherent as you would have been expected. And because if people aren't using the capabilities, then your benefits are definitely, almost certainly not going to be realized as part of that. So all of those three things really touch on the people elements. What do we need? How are we delivering? How are we monitoring and tracking? And how are we governing and making sure we stay on track? or if we need to pivot as part of that delivery, are we all on the same page? Do we understand what we're talking about here? Are we taking the right decisions? And then finally, are we preparing our workforce, our partners, our suppliers to adopt this new thing that we're delivering? And bearing in mind, while I'm talking in a technology context, it's not limited to technology. It's about any form of change. We need to repivot the way we operate. Do we have the right stakeholders in place, the people on the ground, the boots on the ground, delivering this stuff on a day-to-day basis? Are they involved in that? Are they inputting into and shaping the solution or not? Or is it being done to the workforce, for example, whatever nature of change that is? And I think that, to me, really emphasizes that possibly we are at risk of losing sight of the people dimension. Whatever change we're delivering, be it a transformation, be it through program delivery or an ongoing product evolution, ultimately it's delivering something to some people somewhere. And that could be our internal people, or it could be our stakeholders, or it could be our customers or wider stakeholders as well. And I think
that for me is really interesting, because if we take AI as an example, more often than not, AI is currently cited as, well, it's going to do it for me. So why do the people matter in that respect? Because ultimately, once I get the technology in, there is no adoption, right? Or is there?
Well, I mean, you say the AI is going to do it for me. What's it going to do for you? Do you really understand the ramifications and the nuances, what it is this new piece of shiny capability is going to be delivering for you? Are you going to abdicate the accountability for the outcomes that the AI is delivering that previously would have been delivered through your workforce and through your manual intervention, human interaction? Are you comfortable with that? And when you've got it's not deterministic in the way as maybe early generations of automation were. A plus B happens and then C results. Actually, you don't know what A and B are. And is it plus, or is it multiplying, or is it some other kind of operation that's happening? Because the thing is learning as it goes on. And as we know, the machine learning needs the prompts. With any form of learning, when it's human learning, there needs to be some kind of tutoring or teaching going on. And that human requirement is still there, even though it's a machine that's receiving that tuition, as it were, in terms of the inputs into the learning model and how that grows going forward. The other piece is that we will need to factor in exception management when things do go wrong. We will need some oversight. Whatever your policy is, that we will leave the AI to do it, and we'll deal with the fallout that way, or actually before anything goes out to a customer, for example, that it is validated and checked before it goes out. There is still a people there's still a people component in that delivery. So I would argue, I think it's a naive view if people are thinking we flick the switch on it and it does its magic and we continue operating, but far more effectively and efficiently, and driving down our cost, delighting our customers. I would submit that is probably the least likely outcome, given the general maturity of the technology, but also the organizations in consuming.
And also, I would also think that the longer term implications, these things need to be improved. We need to understand how the system in the background actually works and what it's actually doing. So if we need to make a business change, then we need to have humans involved to really understand, well, what is that change going to be? How's it going to work? How will it change? And therefore, what do we need this device or application or whatever it is work in the future? And only humans can do that piece, because these machines don't know the strategy. They don't know where we're going. And ultimately, they don't really understand anything. But there is a lot of hype out there that says, hey, get these agents, get other things doing it for you. And actually now we can remove a quarter of our workforce. And that may be a short-term view, because you may not be thinking about what are you actually going to miss, even though you have immediate cost savings. You may have some long-term costs that are hidden that come out in the long run. So in your opinion, like how do we tackle some of these things? I mean, is the new technology and the new systems, is that a massive revolution in terms of how we should tackle system delivery or major transformation programs, or what do you think?
I think my view is, I think the fundamental precepts remain unchanged. I think if we were to wind back to maybe, let's say, a decade, the large systems transformation, systems-led transformations, they had a people, process, and technology components, the triumvirate around that. I don't significantly view that as having changed. I think there's probably, depending on the discipline and the area of focus, there may be a different primacy around elements of the technology that maybe would have consumed more effort in the past, maybe have been diminished, but that's been offset, I think, by maybe more impact on the process side or the people side, as we say. So if you're delivering an end-to-end capability that has a different component of technology around that, that will have an impact on your people, and that could be, well, actually, we are free to release chunks of our workforce, groups of our people around that, and who's left in the organization will have to reconfigure and repivot to a different way of working. It's never the case. I don't feel, certainly within my lifetime, that will be a situation that organizations will be able to deliver services to people, customers, without having any human touch within that orchestration at all. So I think the fundamental model remains. I think in the same way as where once we were focused mostly on the waterfall construct for delivering technology capability, now it's much more agile, it's much more ongoing continuous improvement through the product model. So those disciplines have changed, but fundamentally it's still people, process, technology, that triangle almost. And I think the difficulty is going to be navigating. So how does that shift the balance more towards people or process element? Because a lot of the technology is maybe self-administering, or more of it's self-administering compared to the past. So I think it's probably really understanding that mix.
Yeah, and also perhaps understanding at the start, right? I mean, where I've seen many programs fail is the strategy at the start is not clear. Why are we doing this? What are we aiming to impact? What are we actually aiming to change? And I guess the delivery approach is not clear. How do we intend to enable that change? Whether it's a program delivery approach, do we use different work streams? How do we do agile? What do we do? Or how do we actually change the capabilities with our organization in order to be able to realize those changes? And I think a lot of people are currently jumping, perhaps because of the hype, into a technology-led solution. Hey, we need AI in this, but AI to do what? I mean, you see a lot of this stuff on LinkedIn and other sources. People have these jokes around. Oh, the answer is the AI, but what is the question? And I think a lot of this technology is underpinned by that. Is the basics really do matter? But figure out the strategy, figure out how you're going to mobilize, figure out how you're going to put the right governance in place. And sometimes use these new tools, use these new systems, use these new ways of working as an accelerant in terms of what you're actually going to do, but don't replace them. But otherwise, it all will fail. And actually, I would say from a change management human side of things, involve the people as early as possible, especially if the change is going to be radical, because some of these systems, when they go in, they may change the ways of working, they may change the business processes, and you need the people who truly understand how the business works to be involved in that conversation, or you may design something that actually doesn't work.
Correct. And I think more than involved, I think have an active role in shaping the solution, whatever the solution is. It really cements the accountability, the buy-in, and actually having those channels open. Actually, the way we really work is subtly different to what's been envisioned. And so feeding those changes in rather than it's been deployed at the end of let's say a lengthy delivery time frame, and what's landed is, well, it doesn't allow us to do our jobs. So we'll stick with our spreadsheets. Thank you very much. It's all very nice, but it doesn't actually allow me to deliver my objectives. I think the other piece with the AI thing in particular is the fear of missing out dimension. I think there is definitely amongst executive leaders, I think there is this latent fear that because our competitors are so apparently consuming this capability, deploying it, and making huge gains as a result of it, we need to be in that journey as well. We need to get on that train. And as you were saying, okay, so we'll deploy the AI, but what for? That's the difficult question that doesn't really get any airtime internally with all the big rush of, we want to do more generative AI implementations, and we want to use the chatbots and all the rest of it. That's great, but for what? And what's interesting, that a number of studies have been done, some quite significant, sizable studies, which are all out in the public domain already. But they're citing of the order of 95% of AI initiatives have been cut short because they haven't been able to demonstrate even the first order of benefits. Benefits in the sense of not just ROI, but equally the performance and another metric benefits. And they're being canned. as a result of that. And you think of the amount of speculative investment that's possibly of a magnitude greater than is actually warranted based on the experiences so far. Add in the fear of missing out element. I think the focus is, again, it's being skewed towards this is the shiny new thing that all our competitors apparently we understand are using. We need to be in that game as well, without really understanding what is the business problem. So again, the same principles around what is the business problem, the true business problem, which dial on the business speedometer are we targeting here, to then inform our solution around the people, process, and technology elements around that. And those boring things around looking at the end-to-end process independently of the technology, they're still there. And do you have the right people? And are your people organized in the right way? Do you have the OD, the organizational design set up to underpin those capabilities that you're looking to implement or not? Those requirements are still there. Just happens to be a greater component of automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all those components now than maybe 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, and I would say in that, right? I mean, a lot of this, the delivery approach is still the same as it's always been, right? Define where you're going to go, understand what exists today, understand ideally where you want to get to, and then start looking at the solution. And I think a lot of people are currently jumping to these the solution in the absence of actually having looked at all of the things that you mentioned there, and really thinking about what is the true people impact. And ultimately, I mean, there are some charts out there that actually show where are some of these technologies really useful and where are they not being used, right? So it's not going to be the answer for everything. But I suppose the word of caution of this conversation is really around these new technologies are not the answer to everything, but if done right, they can be a huge benefit. But it's not about jumping on the bandwagon. It's really understanding where are you going, how are you going to get there, and then looking at what the answer is, as opposed to trying to answer an unknown question. And I guess the key thing here is that the people really do matter. They're really integral into how businesses operate these days. And actually, I think a lot of the hype and a lot of the discussion at the moment has moved away from that to try and find a technological answer to a problem that may or may not exist. And actually, there's so much knowledge and tacit, I guess, knowledge in people's heads and the way that we communicate as humans that it tends to be forgotten at the moment. And also the growth of organizations for the future, it seems to be forgotten in a lot of conversations around, okay, how do we train the future leaders of the world? How do we train people to actually understand how things need to operate? So even if the machines are actually doing this, so there's a whole new world that's coming, in my opinion, that needs to be figured out.
Totally agree. I mean, the fundamental ways of working are going to be significantly impacted as a consequence of this. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Who are we gearing up for when we're looking at our succession planning, our recruitment models, the skills that we need for the future? How are they changing as a consequence of this? They're all material impacts around this piece. I think the other element to bring in is dependencies on things like architecture, data stewardship, data ownership, accountability. Particularly for AI, it's so dependent on, it needs to be coordinated with the controls you have on the data side of things, because if your data is not sufficiently managed for the sort of areas you're targeting for, then the ramifications of that will be significant, and you will probably find out about them quite late when damage has potentially been done, where decisions have been taken. You don't have the right controls. If your strategy is to leave the technology to do its thing, but the ramifications come through, and then you're dealing with fallout from that perspective, which is significantly dependent on the wrong kind of architecture or the wrong data governance or the consumption of data in the wrong way, or worse still, sort of contravening one's obligations as an organization for some of the more sensitive elements of data as well, without even knowing about it, which can be significant, right? And also quite high probability. You don't know really where the data is kind of squirreling through your ecosystem. You've got the architectural elements, because none of these things exist in isolation. Even now, it'll be consuming other platforms, there'll be integrations with other platforms and other sources of data within the wider enterprise ecosystem as well. So what does that look like? You are critically dependent on the specific knowledge that you have as an organization, on how you've configured, how you've operated, how you've evolved over time to try and bring this new piece in the puzzle in. Do it in a way that you understand, even if you don't understand where the risk areas are, you do understand at least where the consumption is going, how that's flowing through. So you have a reasonable sense of where the risk area is. Because the fact of the matter is you won't be able to have totally cleansed data that's completely defined, completely implemented in a model that reflects reality that day-to-day operations are consuming right now, and you bring in the new capability and you plug it in and it all continues seamlessly. It just doesn't work like that. Part of the challenge is going to be discovery. You can't do a complete discovery because it'll be like boiling the ocean. So where are your risk areas and appetites around that? And how is that governed? How has that got senior stakeholder and board level sanction? But these are the risk areas we're focusing on. And these are the areas that are critical for our operation from a data perspective that's going to be touched and operated on by this new capability that's coming in. And I think those things are critically dependent on the people, the acquired knowledge, skills and experience and organizational understanding is such a critical determinant, I think, for doing that safely and successfully.
So if you think about the people listening to our conversation, what 2 or 3 things would you want to leave them with in terms of if they're looking at some of these new changes in the world, or if they're in the middle of them and actually finding themselves a little bit at a loss? What are the couple of things that you think they should think about or consider?
I think don't be swayed by the promises that you can potentially interpret from what's being said in the wider domain about some of the capabilities like this. I still think sticking to the long established model of the people, process, technology triumvirate is a really good place just to validate and at least reference the scope areas that you may be considering, and just ask yourself, are we devoting enough attention to the impacts on process? Very difficult. I think in my experience, organizations are quite reluctant to look at that because it probably is the basis of, I don't know, 20 years of evolved ways of working, which are probably poorly documented. So there'll be a question around how much do we need to retrospectively document just in order to change? Yeah, there is no answer for that, but at least you have to consider what the process impact is going to be and how that plays into the people element, both in terms of, as we were saying earlier, shaping the solution, understanding the need, but also then to be able to implement and take decisions at the right point in time through the governance, and then adopt and consume whatever it is that is being delivered in a way. Because what you don't want to do is spend significant investment in a capability that doesn't fit for whatever reason, and so therefore is not used. You may as well have not bothered. So I think keep those basics in hand. I think the other piece that specifically around the people element is data is important. I think increasingly, when we're talking about the range of people, sort of capabilities and interests from senior stakeholders in the organization right through to the person who's actually doing the day-to-day, they all have skin in the game around this. What's the unifying factor for that? It isn't data. I think data is important. You know, how much, how many, where, whom, why, impact, cost, all of these things, absolutely important. I think the thing that is probably the biggest success factor is what's the story that we're talking about here? Because understanding that story and really getting it, and I think we're just neurologically wired to respond to a story presentation that we're unable to deliver this capability or this service to our customer that impacts them in this way. It's something we can carry around with us better and then work out, okay, so this little piece of work, this very discrete piece of work that I'm doing as part of this, how does that relate to that piece of making lives better or delivering better outcomes for our customers or stakeholders? How does that meld in? Because I think, again, inherently we've evolved to reflect on that. And there are so many, just in the wider society, there are so many aspects where if you look from a data perspective, there's very little evidence for some of the big movements or some of the long established societal sort of angles, if you like, on things to do with, you know, beliefs and so on and so forth. Evidentially, you couldn't really pluck out and say, here's evidence of da-da-da-da. But yet these established models are so compelling that they are there globally and they're informing, you know, practically everything we do. And I think there's an element around that is how do we humanize the journey through stories that we're embarking on here as an organization, because that will fan out into multiple areas that people will be able to draw their own inferences and interpretations for. I think that's a big part of the communication challenge. I think more it is less is more, but really focused around that thread of the A to Z that we're going for as part of our transformational change journey. I think that's a big one, and that's a critical enabler, I think, the people side, because it have manifests itself across a whole range of dimensions, setting the strategy through towards implementing and adopting. And we haven't spoken about what happens post deployment, the continuous improvement piece, keeping an eye on what's going through and being able to understand where that needs to evolve and be adapted going forward based on our actual experience, because it's all about learning by doing. So while we'll be trying to push things out quickly on the basis that, okay, we'll learn quickly and we'll fail fast if we need to, but at least we've got something over some usable capability from that. We'll learn more quickly and a greater knots around that. I think that story underpinning is critical for that. Have we delivered what we've done? The numbers are telling us something slightly different. Does that feel reasonable? Does that land with us? Inherently, does it feel like we've achieved what we've set out to do or not? So those would be my three things.
Yeah, and I agree, right? I mean, the way I look at it is simply, as you said, right? Start with the strategy, start with the why. Why am I doing this? Or if you're in the middle of a transformation, take a breath and say, am I still going in the direction that I need to go? And secondly, am I involving the right people? Am I really thinking about the true impact of this on my organization in terms of how my customers are going to feel, how my workforce is going to feel, and have I designed what I intend to do in the correct way? And then I would just have a simple piece of advice for anybody embarking on any of these programs is just start with the basics. Set up the right governance, set up the right control, agree up front how you intend to actually execute, and make sure that people understand how to do that. That's where these things often fail. It's start with the basics. Don't be bamboozled by some of these shiny new toys that are coming out, but also don't discredit them, because they may be awesome and they do really, really great things. Shanali, I think this was a great conversation. Thanks so much for your time. I think it's fantastic to be able to talk about these things and be able to share our thoughts with people.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.